Hello and welcome to In Conversation. I'm Tim Ecott. In April 2012, a man swam across the River Thames during the famous Oxford versus Cambridge boat race. His name was Trenton Oldfield, and he was later sentenced to 6 months' imprisonment for causing a public nuisance. He says he wanted to stage a protest at elitism and inequality in British society. Trenton Oldfield is one of the founders of This Is Not a Gateway, which describes itself as a platform for critical projects and ideas related to cities. On his release from prison, Trenton came into our studios. I began by asking him what had prompted his protest in the first place.
There's an infinite number of reasons, but the main ones, I guess, or the kind of pivotal moments that pushed me into the river, from the bank into the river, were in the 3 days before the boat race actually happened. There was 3 major laws that were introduced and passed in Parliament that had a significant impact on our future as, members of the community in Britain. That was they had passed the Queen had given royal assent to the bill that was to sell off the NHS, which is a major change to the social welfare agreement in this country. Secondly, was there was the introduction of the bill into Parliament that was going to be introduced, and it was introduced in the Queen's speech, that allowed the authorities to monitor all our digital equipment, all our correspondence, digital correspondence. And the last thing that pushed me really over the edge and into the water was the Minister for the Olympics said, you should dob in your neighbours if you think they might protest at the Olympics. And I thought, after the culmination of those 3 events, it becomes, I'm not sure, many people that protest may speak in the same way, it becomes quite a bodily experience of this kind of level of injustice that you feel and these kind of inequalities.
So it was a kind of anger, would you describe it? A frustration, a sudden realisation that you felt things were not going the way they ought to?
I've been working on issues of inequality for my entire adult life, and I've done all the right things. I've worked in the right jobs to address inequality. I've been on every protest march. I've done all the right kind of techniques, and that everybody expects that the due diligent process and the right way of protesting, etc. And nothing was changing. So I was interested in how other methodologies, other protest tactics could be interwoven into that to try and create, I guess, more of a shock around issues. We're living in the most unequal city in the West, which is kind of crazy, and it's completely unnecessary. The level of income and the amount of money that exists in Britain, people shouldn't be living in poverty. The borough I live in, over 50% of children live in poverty. It's bordered by Canary Wharf and the City of London. Something is not right. There clearly needs to be some, serious work done. Even within the left, I wanted to provoke discussions about, tactics, methodologies of how to protest and what, provoke a kind of discussion around those issues as well.
So what put the idea of the boat race? I mean, you say these 3 sort of parliamentary moves had sort of inflamed your sense of injustice, but why the boat race?
Firstly, it's symbolic. I think, British people understand symbols very well. It's symbolic in that 70% of the cabinet that passed these laws were Oxbridge graduates. It's symbolic in that 3 weeks before the Oxford and Cambridge boat race is a race called the Head of the River race, where 403 boats race in exactly the same course. They go in the opposite direction, and they Oxford and Cambridge, interestingly, don't compete. They have their own race separately, which I think is very interesting. That race, the Head of the River race, has no funding, no television coverage, is actually the premier rowing race in the country, not the Oxford and Cambridge boat race. And if you look at those kind of things about how on a weekend, which is an Easter weekend, which lots of people have a problem with people, doing sport on the Easter weekend, that the Oxford and Cambridge boat race chooses to do it on the, that weekend. They create their own little bubble of kind of reality. So it's kind of representative of, what's going on in society. It's this kind of separate race, lots of TV, lots of money, huge sponsored by corporate, entities, etc.
They're a symbol for you. I mean, the fact that it's Oxford and Cambridge, the two most prestigious institutions, that it's historical.
What does prestigious mean? That's one of the silliest words. It's like pride or...
Well, they have an academic record that people respect.
I've worked with a lot of people from Oxbridge, and they're not the most critical and rigorous people. I think what you'll find with Oxford and Cambridge is a lot of kind of people that become part of the mechanism, part of government. I mean, what were they called in China? People that, the mandarins.
So one of your targets is the Oxbridge system. I mean, you targeted the boat race, but it sounds to me like
not particularly. I mean, in essence, there's many problems with it. People that go to Oxford and Cambridge, it's not that matters. I mean, you can go to Oxford and Cambridge and be a brilliant critical thinker or lawyer or academic, or it doesn't mean A equals B. Oxford and Cambridge. It's more the kind of that was very symbolic of kind of British society of a problem. But you can go to Oxford and Cambridge and be a very critical, radical thinker. But the majority are not. The majority go there in the hope of becoming part of, the establishment, which is part of this British culture of kind of aspiration. Like you'll be a working class kid or something, and you want to go to Oxford and Cambridge to join the kind of a gravy train or something, rather than kind of do critical work.
But isn't that just a practical reality? We're an old country, and institutions get refined to pick the best and train up people to serve the state in a way with a small S.
Every country is old, and this is another kind of thing that Britain has about itself that is something else. And it's honestly, in my experience, they're not the best. They may think they're the best, and that's an interesting kind of thing. But then, by and large, in my experience, not the best.
So the boat race was central to you. I mean, you think the very idea of the boat race represented a lot of what defines Britain and defines the establishment, and that you feel is not worthy of the respect that perhaps people assume it is.
I'm not interested in the debate about respect or not. I mean, that's an obsession that Oxford and Cambridge people have themselves. That's not me, but I think it was a symbol of the establishment and a symbol of kind of these two tiers that exist in Britain.
So when did you actually come up with the idea of going into the river?
I bought the wetsuit the day after the Minister for the Olympics said, Daubignon, and I think the boat race was the next day. So it was spontaneous.
Had you swum in the Thames, though? I mean, most people are rather intimidated at the very idea of just leaving the bank, let alone swimming right into the middle of the river.
Yeah, I think it's a shame that there's such a concern about swimming in the Thames. There's an actual place where I did it. There's an annual race right there called the Great River Swim, which is, it's been going, I think, close for a decade now, which I helped promote in previous years. I hadn't actually done the swim. I was involved with the promotion side, but I'd watched it many times, and I knew it was a relatively safe place to swim. It's a wonderful experience to swim in the Thames.
Anyway, you succeeded in the sense that the race was halted, albeit temporarily. And then what happened? Were you pulled out of the water by a safety boat, or did you swim ashore? What happened then?
Yeah, no, I was pulled out of the water by the umpires. Lovely chap who is the umpire came and picked me up. He was also in my court case, and kind of didn't speak in favour, but sort of in the court case sort of mentioned that there was no chaos and that it was quite calm. He's a very lovely man.
What did he say to you when he pulled you onto the boat?
He just pulled me on and plonked me there. Didn't really say anything. I think he called me over, so I swam over to the umpire's boat. I sat on the seat. He just said, "Sit there, don't move." He's a very nice man, and there was no kind of extra tension. I didn't feel threatened. I didn't think they felt threatened. It was a mild confusion. They were more.
And then you were taken to the police station, and were you then formally charged with an offence?
I was at I think 11 o'clock at night. I was formally charged. All these special detectives came and all this kind of, and they wanted to interview me and.
So when did you first get the chance to actually say to a policeman or a lawyer or a journalist or whoever, I wanted to disrupt the boat race because I believe British society is unfair.
Well, I don't just believe British society is unfair. I believe a culture of elitism that permeates throughout many societies is unfair. I think it was straight away. I mean, I said it straight away when the first police officer asked me what I did. I said it was a protest against elitism.
What was his reaction?
Fine.
I mean, we've been talking about the idea of protest, raising the profile of protest, making a statement in some way that people will take note. Who did you want to notice this?
It was a very personal thing. It wasn't. I didn't do it to be in the media. I didn't do it to become well known. Or it was very personal. I knew the part of the river. I knew the race. I knew the situation. The previous 3 weeks, let alone the previous 30 years of kind of issues. It was very personal. It wasn't particularly aimed. I mean, I did a post on the internet primarily so I wouldn't, be shot by kind of terrorist police, and that in some ways some of the issues would kind of, get out straight away. And over 500,000 people went onto that page, which was, I have to say, really unexpected. I would have thought maybe it would have got on the, 6 o'clock news, guy pulled out of the river protesting at the race. I never imagined. I probably should have expected it, but I didn't. I thought it would be a minor kind of story.
Are you confessing to naivety then? I mean, did you genuinely think you could do this, make some kind of a statement, and the world wouldn't notice?
Why would the world notice about some archaic, pageant?
Well, because as you say,
it was a pageant.
Yes, but it was televised.
It's like an out of date.
But it was a Saturday TV televised sport, which hundreds of thousands.
I don't have a TV. I don't have a TV. I don't understand. Okay, so you have these things that happen. On holiday weekends, certain sporting events that fill people's time or whatever. I mean, but, I never imagined that it would be. I mean, because I thought that I would have been pulled out of the river anyway, before the race, 500 metres before the race.
So tell me about the media then. How did they react? There must have been some curious journalists out there who thought, why is this man swimming in the river on boat race day?
I guess so, yeah.
Did they want to hear your message? What did they want from you?
I mean, you're the journalist. You could answer that better than me. I don't.
Well, I know what I want to hear, but I mean, at the time, were they tabloid reporters? Were they TV journalists? What were they?
It was everybody. I mean, it was everybody. I mean, there's a photograph where I came out of the police station where I was smiling because I thought that a traffic light had gone off. Those speed camera lights, and then I started to realise that there was 30 photographers there and TV crew, etc. I mean, it just seemed absurd to me. I mean, for goodness sake.
But did you talk to them?
What was going on in the world at that time, and there's 30... I mean, it just was just the most peculiar thing to me.
But I think
it just completely caught me off guard.
People will be mystified that you felt a sense of injustice about the world, let's say, or Britain, whichever way you want to put it. You decided you needed to do something in the public eye or something to draw attention to the elitism that was operating and was symbolised by the boat race, which is a very well publicised event. And yet you say you're surprised that the media then want to know why you did it.
I mean, I guess I'm surprised at the scale. I mean, I think all of us are. I think, there's been a whole public inquiry about, those kind of media methodologies. And, particularly, I think if there's any naivety, I probably didn't calculate how many people actually are Oxbridge graduates in media.
Is it the fact that the media is part of this Oxbridge conspiracy, or is it just that you did something extraordinary that people want to know about?
Look, honestly, I don't know. You're the journalist. I really don't know. I mean, you presumably hang out with other journalists and know the kind of... I don't.
Were they interested in what you had to say? I mean, on a proper level, were they truly interested in what your message was or what your motivation was, or did they just want to know who is Trenton Oldfield? I mean, you've got even your name is distinctive.
I mean, I really don't.
I mean, did they give you the chance to actually explain your ideas behind the protest?
I don't believe so. No. I believe they very much took a perspective that they wanted to take, and they wanted sound bites, to kind of... I mean, they took things from my Twitter account or whatever and, twisted them. I mean, they said that, I was always cynical of the media, but now I read every single, line in every paper saying that's not true, that's probably not true. They probably massage that because my
Do you
experience...
feel you were misrepresented in the reporting of what
I mean,
happened?
to be honest, I haven't really read that much about what people wrote, etc., because, I wasn't interested in that. I did the protest for very clear purposes. All the people that are close to me and the people that know the politics that I've been working on for decades know what it was about. That's what mattered to me. I didn't really care what ex-journalists wrote or whatever. But it is fascinating when you do read some of the things, and people, friends had written to me saying, oh, you live in this kind of very expensive, apartment or whatever, which is, plainly untrue. Not one building and not one flat in the building I live in has ever been sold. They can't make those kind of judgments. They just make things up. But that's interesting to me. That's not, I don't care. It doesn't affect me. That's their problem, that they need to lie. And
you must care if you're misrepresented and people then form an untrue opinion of who you are.
To be honest, I don't really care. I know who I am. The people that are close to me know who I am.
People have drawn political inferences, not just from your protests, but how your protests, the reaction that came down from the authorities in Britain. You've, of course, been compared to the punk rock protesters in Moscow, Pussy Riot. What do you make of that comparison?
Considering how much the British media got behind Pussy Riot, that's probably the one thing that I was fascinated by, with the difference in how they responded to me, that they, really confronted some significant issues, and they were, sent to prison like I was for their political activities. But then something in the culture here forces people to behave differently when it's their own situation, their own politics.
You're presumably implying that there's a double standard, that people could get behind Pussy Riot in the media here, but not get behind your action, or not protest that you'd been sent to prison for what you saw as a similar level of protest.
I do believe there was a lot of support when I was sent to prison, and there was a lot of support when I did the protest as well, but not from the kind of mainstream media. And I wonder if there's a possibility for a culture. We hear of this kind of concept of the Stockholm syndrome, where, somebody that's captured by somebody starts to build sympathy for their oppressor. And I'm starting to wonder if there's the English culture, because of so many generations of kind of abuse and, you stick your head above the parapet and it gets knocked off, that there's a kind of cultural Stockholm syndrome. They build they turn out, wave flags for their, people that are oppressing them. And then at the same time, because they still have these frustrations and these anxieties and these tensions, that they know the inequalities, they take it out on each other. So they start doing really crazy kind of Twitter, attacks on each other, and rather than doing it on the,
Do you think the British people are oppressed?
I don't know if it's oppression. I think it's abuse. I think it's hundreds of years of abuse. Who's been abusing who? I think now everybody's abusing everybody because of the whole kind of colonial experience, because of there's a real mistrust between people, and I think it's mostly English culture. There's a real culture of aggression and suppression, and it comes out in these very peculiar ways, like we see on Twitter, regularly, where people will, just destroy people. It feels like to me...
You think that England is a particularly unkind society?
Not on a day-to-day level with people that you meet, but in these situations where things happen, where there's political context at stake, or and kind of maltreatment.
I just need you to explain where you see this abuse, because most British people like to think that we live in a relatively free society, in a society that we would not swap for another. And people from many other cultures seem to want to come to Britain because they see it as a place where they can live more freely than they can in their own country.
I think that's one of the most fascinating things, that they could possibly...
Do you think you dispute it?
I dispute it strongly. I've been in prison for a political protest. I'm fascinated with how many institutions in Britain are deeply corrupt. We pedophiles and, rigging of foreign exchange things, rigging of gas bills. I can't think of an institution in Britain that isn't deeply corrupt. And I don't think it's a conspiracy. I think it's a momentum, and I think it has a lot to do with this kind of culture of wanting to kind of... it gets suggested here as kind of an aspirational culture to be kind of better. Or
But a lot of people would say yes, we have uncovered that corruption. The media has uncovered that corruption. And it's actually because Britain is so open that we can now know about these things, that these things have come out.
I know, and that's such... I love that. I love that kind of, that story that they tell about themselves.
The government is acting on those things. I mean, the government is reacting to that knowledge. I mean, that is surely a sign that it's not corrupt.
Reacting doesn't mean anything.
Well, it does if they change the law.
Possibly. I don't believe, for example, even if, for what we call the left were put in power here, that it would change. Because the culture creates this situation. Maybe it's capitalism, maybe it's Stockholm syndrome, but it creates this situation where the institutions end up becoming corrupt and are not working for the people. What I'm interested in is how do we make society more equal? Our society is going in the opposite direction. It's getting more and more isolated, more and more. People want to become more and more isolated. Buildings are getting bigger walls around them. People are becoming, you have to go through so many things to get into a radio station now. It's becoming more and more isolated step by step, rather than the opposite, which to me seems the direction we need to go, because you'll know most of the politicians, for example, in Parliament now, all had free education. All these important things where you have this potential to kind of have the maximum ability to live, to be free, are being reduced and isolated.
How do you describe your politics? What are you? Are you an anarchist? Are you a communist? Are you a liberationist?
I don't know. I'd love to know what other people think. I'd love to know what other people. I don't really know. I know what I'm interested in. I'm interested in creating a more kind of.
Would you cast a vote? Is there a party that you would support here?
I don't vote. I always write a kind of essay on the back of the form. I turn up and I donkey vote or whatever and write an essay which nobody will ever read or whatever. But
isn't that pointless then? Aren't you?
Isn't everything pointless? Isn't life?
Is that your basic problem? Do you think life is pointless?
No, of course not. I actually love life. I think that's probably the difficulty. I love everything. I'm in riding alongside the Thames today with the sun, and what motivates me is working towards equality. It's very clear, and it seems a very possible thing to be done. And we have the resources. There's an abundance in society, especially in Britain, which has managed to take stuff from everywhere. There's so much money here as a result of the colonial projects and slavery that were funded, etc. There's so much potential here.
You've been to prison as a result of the boat race protest. What has going to prison made you feel about British society and about what you want to do about it?
Well, I guess it's confirmed. If I needed any more confirmation of kind of the mechanisms and who the judiciary supports and, what its interests are, etc. My work continues. It continues. The same thing continues. It was a very invigorating experience for me to be in prison. I met some very good, interesting people. It was very interesting to learn about how simple it is to be in the wrong place at the wrong time and end up in prison. Nobody knows why they're in prison. Is it punishment, retribution, rehabilitation?
What was it for you?
I have no idea. I have no idea what prison was. The people I shared cells with didn't know why they were in prison.
Did you feel you were being punished?
I didn't feel punished. I read non-stop. For me, it was an amazing experience.
Surely not enjoyable.
It wasn't unenjoyable. The people that suffer from prison are your relatives and your people that are close to you.
Surely being told you go to sleep at this time, you get up at this time, you're locked in this room, surely that, for most people, is a living nightmare.
I think a lot of people live that now on the outside, don't they? Because
you didn't find it mentally or physically tough?
I found talking to my partner tough because I know the stress that it put on her. But for me, no, it wasn't tough. But actually, once you're in prison, once you pass the threshold and you're in prison, you realize that it's not what it's kind of made out to be on television and in films and all that kind of stuff. There's an incredible camaraderie between the prisoners. There's a real unity, and it's not what people think at any stretch. And
sounds like you're saying if Britain does one thing well, it does the prison thing well.
I'm not saying anything at all like that. I'm suggesting that the people in there make do and build relationships and a solidarity that is not perceived by others that have never had anything to do with prison.
Would you risk protesting again if you felt certain that you would go to prison again?
I will continue definitely to do. I mean, all the work that I've continued. I write books, we hold discussions, we hold events.
Are people likely to want to hear your message now, more, having gone to prison for your beliefs in a way?
I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. What do you think?
Well, I'm interested. I think our listeners are interested, but I just wonder if the media have now lost interest in you now that you've been in prison, or whether people are approaching you to talk to you now.
Yeah, people are approaching me. Media is not the point. I know that's probably unusual for people in the media to think, to hear that.
What is the point?
The point is to just continue to do what people, I'm not the only one in this situation. People are struggling every day. But I want to continue all the work that I've been doing over the last, decade and a half.
But basically spreading the word that there is inequality and people need to fight against it.
I don't think I need to spread the word about inequality, because if you wake up in the morning in Britain, you know it. You try and protest, you try and create a revolution here, you will be pulverized. You will be put in prison. You will be beaten on protests. You will be criminalized. The criminalization of protest is extraordinary. People know this. People wake up every morning in Britain and know the inequalities. They know the risks of protesting. They know that nobody needs to be told this.
You can pretty much say what you want in the media here without risking any kind of official intervention. You name it. If the media think there's a story there, they will go after it and they will publish. That is surely one of the positive things about the freedoms of British society that you seem to not think exist.
I mean, I'm fascinated how this kind of mythologies, that the society is free and not free. And, this is kind of what I'm interested in is ideas. I'm interested in culture. I'm interested in how, even if it was free or not free, the stories that, the mainstream media or whatever would be promoting wouldn't be these anyway. I mean, and the culture of kind of promoting this kind of pseudo-aspirational, which you'll never be able to achieve, and get yourself into huge amounts of debt. This is what I find that happens a lot in this culture, is it's almost trying to find a couple of good things instead of looking at, what's really the culture like here? What's this culture? What are we living in? Why are we living this way? Why are the institutions like this? And I think people, it's like, English people have these hobbies or whatever where they, to distract themselves from the bigger picture. They might, take up fixing cars or, pigeon things. It's like, but what's, because that's the one thing that they can control, and people will have, they're kind of stories, the stories that are being brought up. Nobody's really...
Anti-intellectual.
I don't know if they're anti-intellectual. I just think they're a distraction. There's, what I'm interested in, I know lots of other people are interested in, what is the culture? Let's look into our culture. Let's look into who we are. Let's look into what's created this situation over hundreds of years, from the colonial projects where we interpret ourselves as better, and we hold on to X or Y to kind of hold up ourselves, instead of really digging deep and kind of into the the big cultural issues that are at stake within us and at stake for our children.
That was Trenton Oldfield, the man who disrupted the Oxford-Cambridge boat race by swimming across the Thames. I'm Tim Ecott, and you've been listening to In Conversation.